Hello, snowboarders of the internet. I'm Kevin, your host for another episode of Top 5s with Angry Snowboarder, the only weekly Top 5 snowboard show on the internet. Today we're talking about my top 5 favorite beginner bindings. I apologize Avran couldn't be here. Something hit his elbow, and now he's blue. Starting off here with number 5, that's going to be the Salomon Trigger. This is their entry into fancy frames, basically. So Salomon basically has two fancy frame technologies going on with their binding line. They have the Shadow Fit series stuff, which is the soft heel cup, and then they have their Blaster Tech. Blaster Tech is basically just a rubber bushing that sits underneath the heel cup and connects the very heel of the binding base to your heel cup. And it acts as kind of a pseudo suspension. It actually works really well, and the Trigger is actually a really solid binding. It doesn't have quite the same adjustments you're going to get out of some of the other stuff. You don't really have a forward lean adjustment or a high back rotation adjustment to it, but the straps are comfortable. The ratchets release smooth, they climb well. It's a plastic tooth ratchet as well, so you're not going to tear up your ladders when you don't know how to ratchet down your bindings, because apparently people don't know how to do that and strip ladders. I don't get that. It's weird. Great toe strap. Toe strap is basically just your basic split toe strap, so it's going to mold over your boot because there's nothing to mold. Just got a big window in it for your toe to poke through. And honestly, that's one of my favorite styles of straps out there because there's nothing to go wrong. It's going to fit everything and stay on everything. I was able to actually ride these bindings on an ultimate ride. That bar, it's not soft by any means, and this is a binding under $200, so it holds up. It rides well. It rides on anything. It's not the best dampening, but it's under $200. This is kind of what you get. Overall, it's a pretty dang solid binding. All right, starting off here, getting on to number 4. This is a new binding for 2019 from Rome, the Crux. They built this binding from the ground up specifically to hit that $200 price mark, and they did a really good job with it. Basic split toe strap. So it's going to conform over anything. Your toe's just going to poke through that window. It's going to stay put. It's not going to move around. It's got an injected ankle strap. So it's that new construction that doesn't have any fabric or seams. So the strap's never going to stretch out. It's never going to rip. It's never going to blow out. It's going to stay the same and flex the same from basically day 1 to day 100. And pretty tall high back. So it's going to have some support to it, but it's not overly rigid. It's not overly stiff. So it's still... it's going to give you a little bit of forgiveness when you really need it. And then it does also still have Rome's patented under wrap. So the heel cup does run from all the way from your heel all the way to the underside of the toe of your binding. So it just creates a little bit better leverage onto your heel side to pick up that front of the binding. Just a little bit better energy transfer. Overall, it's a pretty dang solid binding. And actually, the marketing director, when I went to Canada, rode that binding the entire time and actually more or less refused to ride anything else. And that says a lot because he has access to literally whatever he wants from that brand. So Rome Crux, it's actually a pretty dang solid binding specifically designed to hit that $200 price mark. And it's pretty awesome. Check it out. Moving right along to the middle, number 3. And that spot goes to the Nitro Rambler. Pretty basic binding, pretty meat and potatoes, still has the aluminum heel cup out of that line, so it still has a little bit more of that stiffer torsional flex and a little bit taller high back on this, but not overbearing. It's not going to give you calf bite. The ankle strap is pretty basic, has enough 3D shaping to it that it's going to conform over your boot well enough, but not a ton of structure to it, so it's a little bit softer, especially side to side. And toe strap, solid toe strap. Nitro pretty much hasn't messed up a toe strap in the last 10 years, basically, ever since they were rated. The underbase padding is, again, pretty basic, but you're still getting mini disc out of this binding, which that's honestly tech that matters. It really does make a difference. It allows your board to flex a little bit better underfoot, provides a little bit better, truer board flex, and gives you a little bit better board feel. So mini disc with pretty decent straps, good buckles, decent high back, and still has that aluminum heel cup in the back is what puts this binding at number 3. Something that I can ride pretty much every day on almost any snowboard, really. Getting along here to number 2, and that goes to the Flux TT. This binding is pretty basic. A lot of the Fluxes honestly are, and that's one of the reasons I really like them, is there's no fancy tech on them, really. So the Flux TT gets in the list here at number 2 because it's a super versatile binding. It actually made my top 5 list of park bindings. Part of the reason for that is the high back's a little bit shorter, so it's definitely never going to get in your way. It's not super stiff, so it's going to allow some tweakability to it. And it got upgraded with the injected style straps. So there's no fabric, no stitching, no foam, just injected plastic basically. So it provides a lot more support than the old straps used to from Flux, and they're just as comfortable. And that's awesome. Being able to have a strap that offers an actual level of support and you still can't feel it on your boot, that's the holy grail right there for straps. Toe strap, Flux does phenomenal toe straps. It's this kind of hard to explain, honestly, but basically it kind of splits open as you tighten it down across your boot, so it conforms as much as it needs to over your boot to stay put. It works well. The ratchets are smooth on and off. I've never ever had problems with Flux ratchets. The only thing you might ask for a little bit more on the Flux TT is some underbase padding or some just padding in general on the footbed, but downsides to that, whatever. Upsides, you get really good board feel out of it. So Flux TT, light binding, nothing to break on, meat and potatoes, all toolless, solid binding. Before we get on to number one, I'm going to give you some honorable mentions. And my first honorable mention is the Ride Revolt. Now, part of the reason this gets on the honorable mention is really this binding kind of hit above the price point I was really trying to hit for this list. It's a little bit over $200, but it's a really solid binding. It gets upgraded for the 2019 season with the new strap on it. It's the injected style strap, so no seams, foam, fabric to rip, and it gets upgraded to the new high backs. Instead of the useless urethane high back it used to have, now it's the good urethane high back that just has some tweakability up top but actually has some structure to it. And my other honorable mention is honestly kind of just some service to Avran, and that goes to the K2 Indy. It is a really solid binding, but honestly half the reason it got on this list is because Avran rides it, and he rides it on everything. But honestly, that says a lot about that binding and the fact that he's gotten 200 days plus out of one set of indies. That's insane. So if you're just looking for a meat and potatoes binding that's got no fancy frills to it and you just need it to last forever, maybe check out the Indy. All right, made it all the way to number one. And that number one pick for me is the Arbor Hemlock. This binding should not be $200. I rode this binding the whole 3 days that I was in Utah this past season on the Coda Rocker, the new Clovis, the Gooch, everything that I rode the Hemlock on that, and that says a ton about this binding. It's still great for beginners. It doesn't have an overbearing high back to it, so it's a little bit more flexible back there, so it's not going to get in your way. It's super easy to ride, and then that X-based frame, that urethane rubber X that's underneath that binding rides really smooth. It takes care of you, and at the end of the day, you're just a little less fatigued because that underbase padding has been soaking up shock and vibrations the whole time you've been riding it. And it's also got a mini disc, and that mini disc is going to give you better board feel, which is going to allow you to control your board better, and it's going to allow the board to flex better tip to tail, and you're going to be able to control your board better. Lastly, this binding has by far my favorite ankle strap in the entire industry, whether it be a $200 binding, a $300 binding, or $500 binding, which I don't think I've ever ridden a $500 binding, but if I do, the ankle strap's still not going to be as good as this new Arbor ankle strap. It's phenomenal. I can't say enough good things about this ankle strap. It's easily the best ankle strap I've ever ridden in snowboarding, period. It's an injected strap, so there's nothing to blow out, nothing to rip, no foam, no fabric, no stitching, and it has a double ASIM build to it, so it's a little bit higher on the outside top and a little bit lower on the inside bottom. And it just conforms so well and just provides the right progression of support to it, where it's a little bit softer up top, and then as you push further into that strap, it just stiffens up and gives you everything you need out of it. Number one pick for beginner binding, and honestly for anybody just not looking for a super stiff binding, goes to the Arbor Hemlock. Okay, thanks for watching. This has been my top 5 picks for bindings for beginners. Did I miss one? Did I miss your favorite starter binding? If I did, then you're probably wrong. Yeah, I've ridden basically everything, so this is the comprehensive list. I made it. I know it all. Click subscribe. Make sure that you hit the bell so that hitting subscribe actually does something for you, and you get told when these videos come out. And check out Angry Snowboarder VIP. It's a great way to support Angry Snowboarder this channel and to keep these projects coming to you.